Eleanor Blackstone is marching up my driveway at dawn, heels stabbing the concrete like she's trying to summon demons. She's clutching a fresh violation notice, bold red letters underlined twice, as if it were a royal decree. Behind her, half the neighborhood watches from their lawns with popcorn-level interest. "Mark Bennett," she shouts, "your parking situation is completely unacceptable." I sip my coffee. "Good morning to you too, Eleanor." She jabs a finger toward the curb. "That car has been parked there every single night." "It's a public street," I remind her. "And it must be stored in your garage." "It's not my car anymore." The crowd gasps. Eleanor blinks. Ray leans out his truck window with a cheerful wave. "Morning. Did Mark tell you he sold me that thing for $1? Eleanor's eye twitches dangerously. And that's when I realize this won't just be a parking dispute. This will be war. "Hi, my name is Mark Bennett, and before I became that guy locked in a parking war with an HOA president wielding a clipboard like divine judgment, I was just a quiet gearhead who worked long hours kept to myself and poured every spare minute into restoring my 1968 Jaguar E-Type. I'd spent most of my adult life trying to build something calm and steady, until one woman decided that where I parked my car was a threat to the natural order of suburban civilization. Most people in Ash Grove Meadows live under the illusion that our biggest neighborhood threat is the occasional dandelion or a missing recycling bin. But they don't know Eleanor Blackstone like I do. To newcomers, she looks harmless enough. Early 60s, neatly bobbed silver hair, a wardrobe consisting entirely of beige and pale lavender. But once you've lived here long enough, you realize the woman isn't so much a resident as she is a force of nature, sweeping through the community with the unstoppable energy of a bureaucratic hurricane. When she's coming, you feel it. The stiffening air, the faint scent of laminate, the chill of impending regulation. She is, without exaggeration, the temple guardian of this HOA. Unfortunately, I am her new favorite sinner. To be clear from the start, I'm not a reckless guy. I don't throw loud parties. I don't leave tools strewn across the lawn, and I don't decorate for Halloween in early September. My only supposed crime is loving my car a little too much. Hidden safely inside my garage is my treasure, a 1968 Jaguar E-Type Series 1.5 4.2-liter Roadster. Everyone has a dream car. Some want a Ferrari. Some crave an old American muscle brute. Me? I fell in love at 17, standing outside a museum exhibit on British automotive design. There she was under the lights, long and impossibly elegant, curves that defied geometry, that unmistakable oval mouth of an air intake. The placard beneath read, 1968 Jaguar E-Type Roadster, one of the most beautiful cars ever made. Enzo Ferrari himself supposedly said that once. And he was right. That memory stuck. Years later, after scraping and saving and talking myself out of doing something financially irresponsible more times than I can count, I finally found her. An original series 1.5 Primrose yellow wire wheels, like chrome lacework engine rebuilt to perfection. I even had a custom climate system installed in my garage to keep her in museum-quality condition. She's not just a car. She's the car. She doesn't sit outside, not in sun, not in rain, not near anyone's door that might swing open too enthusiastically. She belongs in the garage, and the daily driver belongs on the curb. The first sign of trouble should have been obvious. One calm Thursday morning, I stepped outside with my coffee to find Eleanor lurking, yes, lurking, between Mrs. Hargrove's rose bushes and the HOA-approved decorative mailbox. I nearly dropped my mug. There she stood, half hidden among rose thorns, hunched slightly like a bird watcher waiting for a rare finch. Except she wasn't bird watching. Oh no. She had her binoculars trained directly on my parked hatchback. When she saw me, she jolted upright like a deer caught doing taxes in the forest. I gave her a polite wave. She responded with a slow, disappointed headshake, like I'd betrayed the community by daring to exist. She didn't say a word, just scribbled something furiously on her clipboard and marched away with the ominous energy of a judge slamming a gavel. I should have known right then that disaster was coming. But hope makes fools of us all. That night, I drove home from work, parked as usual on the public street directly in front of my driveway, exactly where the city explicitly allows parking. I locked the car, admired the sunset, and went inside to cook dinner, blissfully unaware that I had triggered Eleanor's personal DEFCON 1. The next morning, I opened my front door and saw it, a paper taped neatly, squarely, aggressively to the center of the door. Notice of violation. Street parking prohibited per CCNRs. The font alone radiated passive aggression. I stood there, barefoot, hair rumpled, coffee steaming in my left hand, reading the words again as if repetition might grant them sanity. When that didn't work, I let out a laugh so sudden and loud that the neighbor walking his spaniel nearly tripped over it. This had to be a joke, right? HOAs can't regulate public streets. I even checked my phone, half expecting a text from my buddy saying, "Gotcha!" But no, this was real. And worse, this was Eleanor real. I emailed her to clarify the obvious. "Hi, Eleanor. Parking on the public street is governed by the city. The city allows it. Therefore, I'm in compliance. Best, Mark." She replied within 5 minutes, as if she'd been waiting, perched over her keyboard like an owl stalking a mouse. "Residents must garage personal vehicles. This is in the CCNRs. Please comply immediately." It was like arguing with a wall, a determined, rule-worshipping, laminated wall of doom. I shut my laptop and paced the living room. Part of me wanted to drop it, move on, maybe roll the daily driver into the driveway just to keep the peace. But another stronger part of me, the stubborn part, the part that believes rules matter precisely when they don't suit someone's personal vendetta, there was no way in hell I was giving in. Not when I'd done nothing wrong, not when the law was on my side, not when the only issue was Eleanor's pathological hatred of my car touching her street. This wasn't about harmony. This was about power. Her power. My compliance. Not happening. As I crumpled the notice and tossed it into the recycling, a strange sense of calm washed over me, like the quiet after a storm, when you know the next one is coming but you're ready to face it head on. Eleanor Blackstone had drawn her battle lines, and I, Mark Bennett, owner of a beautiful 1968 Jaguar E-Type Roadster and a reasonably average daily driver, was officially her chosen adversary. I didn't ask for war, but now that war had found me, I wasn't backing down, not an inch. I'd love to say the next few days passed quietly, that after issuing her dramatic notice of violation, Eleanor retreated to her beige lair to reevaluate her life choices. But no, that would imply she possessed the ability to let things go. By Monday morning, the war had escalated. I opened my mailbox expecting bills, maybe a takeout coupon, perhaps a letter informing me I'd won a free cruise I'd never signed up for. Instead, sitting on top of everything else like a smug paper crown was an envelope stamped with the letters Ash Grove Meadows Homeowners Association Violation Proceeding, Open Immediately. Well, that didn't sound ominous at all. I tore it open, and there it was, a $50 administrative fine for non-compliance with vehicular storage requirements. Vehicular storage requirements. What a phrase. It made parking sound like something out of a nuclear materials manual. I stared at the paper. Then I laughed. Then I stopped laughing because right below the fine was a line that made my stomach drop. Additional fines may accrue daily until the matter is resolved. Daily? Daily? I took a deep breath, folded the letter neatly, and marched straight back inside. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was incredulous. There's a difference. Anger is hot, fast, flaring. Incredulity is cool, focused, the kind of calm that precedes very well-written retaliation. So I wrote Eleanor an email, a polite one, a dangerously polite one. Hi, Eleanor. Thank you for your letter. As previously stated, the vehicle in question is legally parked on a public street. As such, the HOA does not have authority to regulate or fine its placement. Please confirm removal of the fine from my account. Warm regards, Mark Bennett. I even added warm regards, which is the email equivalent of placing a tiny decorative doily over a stick of dynamite. Her reply arrived 6 minutes later. 6. As if she'd been hovering over her keyboard with fingerless gloves like a courtroom stenographer on espresso. Mark. The CC&Rs clearly state all personal vehicles must be stored in the homeowner's garage when not in active use. Your refusal to comply continues to violate this clause. The fine stands. E. Blackstone. No warm regards from her. Not even a passive-aggressive best. Just Blackstone. I swear I could feel her heel clicks through the email. I stepped away from my desk, pacing the kitchen while the kettle hummed on the stove. It wasn't about money. I had $50. It was the principle. The clear, simple, legally obvious principle. The HOA cannot regulate public streets. But to Eleanor, facts were flimsy little things, easily overwritten by the sacred CC&Rs she clutched to her chest like scripture. I took a long sip of tea, trying to channel inner peace. Instead, I channeled something closer to inner pettiness, which, to be fair, is much more motivating. This wasn't some minor misunderstanding. This was a challenge, a direct test. And the thing about standing up to bullies, soft-voiced, clipboard-wielding, regulation-obsessed bullies, is that if you let them take 1 inch, they'll come for your entire garage, your driveway, and probably your mailbox color too. So I wrote back, Eleanor, out of courtesy, I have confirmed again with the city. Parking on our street is fully permitted. The HOA has no jurisdiction over it. As such, the fine is invalid. I will not be paying it. Mark, why hit send? My hand shook, not from fear, but from the thrill of knowing this was the moment she realized I wasn't going to fold. Later that afternoon, while working on a report for my job, I heard an unmistakable sound, the clipped, rhythmic tap-tap-tap of Eleanor's heels approaching my front door. Tap, 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 the footsteps of doom. A moment later, a sharp knock. I considered ignoring it, pretending I wasn't home, moving to Bermuda. But no, this was war. Cowardice wasn't an option. Besides, I was curious to see what she'd say in person. I opened the door. There she stood, clipboard in hand, expression stern enough to curdle milk. Behind her, her beige cardigan fluttered slightly in the breeze like the battle flag of a particularly repressed army. Mark, she said with a tight little smile that didn't touch her eyes. We need to discuss your ongoing violation. I returned the smile with the bright, friendly, totally insincere one I reserve for situations exactly like this. Sure thing, Eleanor. Want to step inside? She hesitated. Eleanor never entered anyone's home unless they had a certificate proving it met all HOA cleanliness guidelines. She stayed on the porch. This is a serious matter, she said, gripping the clipboard like it was a life raft. Your vehicle remains improperly stored. It's parked on the street. A public street, she snapped, as if the phrase itself had an unpleasant texture. The CC&Rs require homeowners to garage personal vehicles at all times, only if the HOA has jurisdiction, I replied calmly. Which it doesn't. Not on the street. Her lips pursed so tightly, I briefly wondered if she'd cause a small implosion. You signed the CC&Rs when you purchased your home, she said. As such, you agreed to the vehicle storage clause. Whether or not the street is public, you are still bound by it. Ah, so that was her angle. She wasn't enforcing traffic law. She was enforcing contractual obedience. It was technically clever. Morally, deeply stupid. My car is legal, I said. The city allows it. And unless the HOA buys the street from the city, that's not changing. Eleanor inhaled slowly, nostrils flaring like a Victorian governess confronting a scandalous neckline. Well, she said, voice icy. "The fines will continue until you correct the violation." Then she turned with military precision and marched away, heels striking the pavement like a countdown to doom. Tap, 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 tap. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it with a sigh. So that was that. She wasn't backing down, but neither was I. This was no longer about a car. This was about the thin, fragile line between reasonable community guidelines and totalitarian suburban madness. And if Eleanor wanted a battle, she was going to get one. You'd think after our little porch confrontation, Eleanor might have retreated, licked her wounds, reorganized her binders, maybe held a solemn candlelight vigil for the authority she didn't have. But that assumption underestimated two things: her stamina for petty warfare, her delusional belief that the CC&Rs supersede the Constitution. By Wednesday morning, the battlefield had evolved. I stepped outside with my usual cup of coffee and froze mid-sip. There, staked into the grass near the curb like some kind of territorial flag, was a bright orange notice. Community reminder: vehicles must be stored in garages. Below it, in much smaller print, non-compliance may result in HOA intervention. Intervention. The word hung in the air like the promise of an upcoming plague. I glanced around. A few neighbors were out walking dogs, jogging, or performing the beloved suburban ritual of picking up newspapers from their driveways. Every one of them gave me the same look, a sympathetic wince. The look you give someone who is about to be executed, but you don't want to be rude about it. Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor 2 houses down, approached with her pug, Pebbles, who wheezed like a rusty accordion with every excited step. "Oh, Mark," she said, eyeing the sign, "you've really upset her." "I didn't do anything," I replied. "Oh, I know that," she said gently, "but she doesn't." Pebbles snorted supportively. Later, on my way to work, I backed the daily driver out of the garage. Just kidding. The Jaguar sleeps in the garage. The daily driver sleeps wherever the city allows, and that will never change. I pulled onto the street and immediately spotted Eleanor standing at the corner with her clipboard, writing something with tight, furious strokes. As I passed, she stared at me with the unblinking intensity of someone trying to set me on fire using only eye contact. I gave her a polite smile and a wave. She did not wave back. By the time I returned home, another letter waited in my mailbox. Second notice: fine accumulation continues. At this rate, she was going to single-handedly destroy a rainforest with her paperwork. That Wednesday evening was the monthly HOA board meeting. I never attend these things because I enjoy my sanity. But after receiving 2 fines, 1 porch confrontation, a yard sign, and the death glare of a woman who probably has rule enforcement embroidered on a pillow, I figured it was time. The meeting took place in the community center, a building designed with all the charm of a dentist's waiting room and none of the reading materials. Inside sat 7 folding chairs, 3 board members, and 1 elderly man who was asleep with his mouth open. Eleanor stood at the front, posture straight as a garden stake, speaking to the room. And so it is my duty to inform the community that habitual non-compliance with vehicular storage policy undermines the harmony and aesthetic consistency of Ash Grove Meadows. I raised my hand. Her eye twitched. "Yes, Mark. Could you explain how my legal parking on a public street undermines anything other than your personal preferences?" A murmur of interest went through the room. Even the sleeping old man half woke, blinked, and then dozed off again. Eleanor's smile was tight, thin, and full of unspoken threats. "You agreed to the CC&Rs when you purchased your property," she said sweetly. "As such, you agreed to comply with all vehicle storage requirements." I shrugged. "Sure, on my property. But the street isn't my property. It's not the HOA's property. It's the city's. They regulate it, not you." The treasurer, a timid man with glasses so thick they looked bulletproof, raised a hand. Technically speaking, he has a point. Eleanor didn't look at him, possibly because if she did, he might spontaneously combust from fear. "My point," she continued, projecting over him, "is that community rules must be followed for the good of everyone." "Even if they aren't enforceable?" I asked. Silence. You could have heard a pine needle drop. Finally, she spoke in a voice so cold it could freeze lava. "I move," she announced, "that a formal violation hearing be scheduled regarding Mr. Bennett's non-compliance." I blinked. "A hearing? Like a trial?" "Exactly," she said, lips curling in triumph. "A disciplinary hearing." A disciplinary hearing for parking on a public street. This woman needed a hobby or a vacation, preferably far from here. "Fine," I said. "Schedule it. Let's do it." A collective gasp went around the room. Eleanor's smile widened, slow and triumphant, like a cat discovering a bird with a broken wing. "Wonderful," she said. "We'll notify you of the date." And just like that, she moved on to the next agenda item, as if she hadn't just declared suburban jihad. When I got home, I stood for a long moment looking at the curb, the same spot I'd parked in for years without issue, the same patch of asphalt now apparently cursed by the wrath of a cardigan-clad warlord. This was no longer about a car or a rule. It was about dignity, about standing up to someone who believed her clipboard was mightier than the law. If Eleanor wanted a hearing, she'd get one, but she had no idea how far I was willing to go or how creative I was willing to be. She thought she could win this. She was wrong. This wasn't the end of the conflict. It was just the opening salvo. The official notice arrived on Friday. Mandatory HOA violation hearing. Attendance required. It was printed on thick cream-colored paper, clearly chosen to give the illusion of solemn authority. Eleanor likely spent an entire afternoon selecting the font, probably something she imagined judges used in medieval courts. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 6 p.m. in the community center, the same building where Joy went to die. I put the letter down and leaned back in my chair. A violation hearing, over parking, on a public street. I should have been angry, or stressed, or at least mildly annoyed. Instead, I felt invigorated. This was no longer just a conflict. It was sport. By the next morning, the neighborhood grapevine had spread the news faster than wildfire in a dry canyon. Mrs. Harmon from the corner house approached me as I was retrieving the newspaper. "I heard about the hearing," she said sympathetically, clutching her robe. "I'm so sorry, dear. You know how Eleanor gets." I nodded. "Determined?" I was going to say unhinged, but yes. Pebbles the pug waddled by, dragging poor Mrs. Alvarez behind him, wheezing like an asthmatic accordion. "You're standing up to her?" Mrs. Alvarez asked, eyes wide with admiration. "Bless you." Cars drove by slowly, windows rolled down. People gave me thumbs up. 2 teenagers even saluted me. Somehow, without trying, I'd become the neighborhood folk hero, the suburban David standing up to Goliath. Except in this story, Goliath had a clipboard and a profound misunderstanding of municipal jurisdiction. All weekend, I researched. Not because I didn't already know the HOA had no authority, but because something told me Eleanor would show up with a binder the size of a small refrigerator, tabs labeled in many shades of righteous fury. I printed out the city's official street parking regulations, a map confirming street ownership, a summary of HOA jurisdiction limits, a copy of the CC&Rs with the relevant clause highlighted. I even bought a folder. A blue one, because nothing says prepared professional like a matching set. For extra effect, I practiced my opening statement in the mirror. Something calm, measured, and annoyingly polite, something Eleanor would hate. Tuesday arrived ominously cloudy, the kind of weather that makes you feel like something dramatic is about to happen. I walked to the community center with my blue folder tucked under my arm. As I approached, I saw shadows moving inside. The room was far more crowded than I expected. People had shown up, A lot of them. Apparently, the promise of HOA drama was the hottest ticket in town. Inside, 3 long folding tables formed a U shape. At the center sat the HOA board, looking uncomfortable in their metal chairs. To the left and right were residents, whispering like they were at the world's least glamorous courtroom. And at the front, standing behind a lectern she definitely brought from home, was Eleanor Blackstone wearing her best cardigan and a proud expression that said, "Welcome to my domain." Eleanor tapped her gavel. Yes, she had a gavel. "Order, please." Tap, tap. Not loud enough to control the room, but loud enough to satisfy her ego. "This hearing," she began, "is to address the ongoing willful violation committed by homeowner Mark Bennett regarding improper vehicular storage." She shot me a smile that was all teeth and triumph. I raised my hand. "Before we begin, can we clarify?" "You may speak during your turn," she snapped. Murmurs. A few laughs. She continued. "Mr. Bennett stands in violation of Section 8.3, which clearly states vehicles must be garaged when not in active use." She gestured dramatically toward a stack of papers behind her. "I have prepared documentation of every infraction." Someone in the audience whispered, "She printed it all?" Another, "Is that color-coded?" I cleared my throat. "May I respond?" She nodded sharply. "You may." I stood, folder in hand, and faced the crowd. "For the record," I began, "the vehicle in question is legally parked on a public street. The city owns the street. The HOA cannot regulate property it does not own." I opened my folder slowly, deliberately, like a magician about to produce a dove. "In fact," I continued, "I have here written confirmation from the city stating that street parking is permitted." A few neighbors nodded as if this were brand new gospel. "And," I added, "the CC&Rs cannot override municipal authority. So while the HOA can regulate garages, driveways, and private property, it has no jurisdiction whatsoever over the public roadway." A few claps, more murmurs. Eleanor's nostrils flared. "This is irrelevant," she said stiffly. "You are bound by the CC&Rs." "I am," I agreed, "and every part of them that applies to my property I comply with. But unless you bought the street from the city recently, did you?" Her jaw tightened. "No," she hissed. "So," I said, "what exactly am I violating?" The treasurer cleared his throat timidly. "If the street is public, I'm not sure we have authority." A board member beside him nodded. "We, never enforce street parking, because we can't." Someone in the back whispered loudly, "Told you!" Eleanor stepped forward, gripping the lectern as though it were the last lifeboat on the Titanic. "This hearing is not about legality," she said sharply. "It is about community standards." I smiled. "Community standards don't override state law, Eleanor." Laughter rippled through the room. Her eyes flashed with pure, undiluted rage. Seeing her losing ground, she played her final card. "Mark Bennett," she said sternly, "your behavior is disruptive, combative, and inappropriate for this community. If you refuse to cooperate, we may issue further administrative actions." "Such as?" I asked. "Suspension of privileges," I blinked. "Which privileges?" "Pool access," she declared triumphantly. I waited. The room waited. Then someone laughed so hard they snorted. "I don't even use the pool," I said. More laughter. Even the treasurer cracked a smile. Eleanor slammed her gavel. Tap, tap, tap. Hard enough that one of the rubber feet fell off. "This hearing is adjourned," she barked, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it. She hadn't won. She'd lost control of the room, the situation, and the narrative. The HOA board immediately huddled, whispering furiously. The treasurer waved me over. "Mark," he said quietly, "we're dropping the fines." I tried not to smile too widely. "Appreciate it." Behind us, Eleanor stood motionless, staring at her lectern like it had betrayed her. I walked home that night under a deep, clear sky, the kind where the stars look close enough to touch. Neighbors waved. Someone clapped me on the back. Pebbles the pug barked approvingly. For the first time, the war felt winnable. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Not for me, not for her, not for the battle of the parking space heard round the neighborhood. Eleanor Blackstone didn't lose gracefully, and she definitely wasn't finished. If life were fair, the violation hearing would have ended the saga. Reason would have prevailed. Eleanor would have retreated with a stiff nod, and I would have parked my daily driver on the street in peace forevermore. But life isn't fair, and Eleanor Blackstone is absolutely not the type to accept defeat. I could feel the shift the very next morning. You know that prickling sense on the back of your neck when you're being watched? Multiply that by 10 and sprinkle on some bureaucratic malice, and that's what greeted me as I stepped outside to retrieve the mail. There she was, standing on the sidewalk across the street, clipboard in hand, silent, watching like a hawk. If hawks wore orthopedic shoes. I gave her a polite nod. She didn't move. "Morning," I called. Nothing. All she did was scribble something on her clipboard. This wasn't over, not remotely. The next letter arrived 2 days later, formal, curt, and radiating disapproval. Notice of continued violation. Although fines have been temporarily suspended pending board reevaluation, resident non-compliance with the vehicular storage clause persists. Further action may be taken. Further action. I swear this woman wrote like she was commanding a medieval army. The letter ended with, "We expect you to resume proper use of your garage immediately." Ah, so that was the new angle. She couldn't fine me, she couldn't regulate the street, but she could still cling to the CC&R clause about garaging personal vehicles. In her mind, the logic was airtight. If a car belongs to me, it must go in the garage. If it isn't in the garage, I'm in violation. Legalities be damned. It was petty, it was flimsy, it was absolutely quintessentially Eleanor. But this was also the moment I realized something important. I had the upper hand. She was no longer fighting with law, she was fighting with loopholes. And if she wanted a battle of loopholes? Oh, I had one ready. That night, as I cleaned my Jaguar's chrome with the sort of reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts, the idea hit me like a beam of divine inspiration. What if the car parked on the street wasn't mine? If the CC&Rs only applied to my personal vehicle, then all I had to do was ensure the daily driver wasn't technically, legally mine. I didn't want to bend the rules. I wanted to obliterate them with the same precision and beauty as a perfectly tuned straight six engine. So I made a call. Enter Ray, agent of chaos. My cousin Ray is the kind of man who finds chaos not just amusing but spiritually fulfilling. He answered on the second ring. "Mark, how's life in HOA prison?" "You want to buy a car?" I asked. There was a moment of silence, followed by a delighted, "Oh, this is gonna be good. What did Eleanor do now?" I explained everything. The fines, the hearing, the looming threat of further action. His laughter grew louder with each detail. "So let me get this straight," he said between wheezes. "If the car isn't yours, she can't fine you?" "Exactly. And you want to sell me your daily driver so you can keep driving it and keep parking it right in front of her house?" "Exactly." Ray cleared his throat dramatically. "For the low price of $1 American, I will happily become the registered owner of the most hated vehicle in Ashgrove Meadows." "Deal," I said. "Well," he added, "it'll cost you another $1 if you want me to pretend to be offended when she confronts me." $1. Final offer. Done. We completed the bill of sale the next day, printed it, signed it, dated it. No loophole left unplugged. Ray even insisted on posing for a picture with the car, thumbs up, as if accepting a grand prize. "That's gonna be her villain origin photo," he said proudly. Legally speaking, the car was now his. Insurance updated, DMV notified. Everything buttoned up tight. Meanwhile, nothing changed in practice. I still drove it to work, still parked it in the same spot, still slept soundly knowing this was going to absolutely, spectacularly ruin Eleanor's day. I could already picture her face. Confusion. Shock. Rage. Betrayal. A masterpiece of suburban melodrama. For a brief moment, life felt peaceful again. I parked the car, went inside, made dinner, watched a movie. No angry knocks, no letters, no yard signs. It didn't mean she wasn't plotting. I knew she was, but so was I. Because now I had the ultimate counterweapon, a car I drove but didn't own, a vehicle she hated but had no authority over, a twist so infuriatingly legal that it would drive her absolutely mad. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and I was ready. It happened on a bright Saturday morning, the kind of day when normal people mow lawns, wash cars, and enjoy peaceful suburban life. I, however, am not a normal person. I was waiting for Eleanor Blackstone to have a meltdown. Not actively waiting, more like emotionally prepared. I stepped outside with a cup of coffee and saw her standing across the street, staring at my daily driver with a level of intensity normally reserved for rare astronomical events. Her posture was rigid, shoulders squared, head tilted slightly as if listening for signs of criminal activity emanating from the hood. I took a sip. This was going to be good. She marched across the street with her clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. "Mark," she said sharply, "we need to talk about your vehicle." "Which one?" I asked, feigning innocence. "The Jaguar?" She narrowed her eyes. "No, the other one." "Oh," I said, sipping my coffee. "You mean Ray's car?" A flicker, just a tiny one, crossed her face, confusion mixed with suspicion. "Ray," she repeated flatly. "My cousin," I clarified. "He owns it now." Her jaw tightened. "That vehicle has been parked in the exact same place every day. It is clearly yours." "Ownership isn't about where you park something," I said. "It's about who legally possesses it. And that's Ray." I watched the words hit her brain like a glitch in a computer program. Her eye twitched. She straightened her cardigan. "Mr. Bennett," she said stiffly, "the CC&Rs state that personal vehicles must be garaged." I finished for her. "Correct. Keyword, personal. That car is no longer my personal vehicle." I handed her a neatly folded copy of the bill of sale, just in case she wanted extra proof. She snatched it with the careful disdain of someone picking up a tissue at a crime scene. She unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the document. Then her face went through the following stages: confusion, recognition, horror, offended, dignity, pure, incandescent fury. "You," she began, voice trembling. "You sold your car? To avoid compliance?" "No," I said calmly. "I sold my car because I found a motivated buyer who appreciates the value of older, slightly dented, questionably reliable hatchbacks." She glared at me. The kind of glare that would wither crops. "This is a manipulation of HOA policy," she said coldly. "No," I corrected. "This is following HOA policy to the letter, which I assume is your favorite way to do things." A couple of neighbors who had at some point begun quietly gathering snorted back laughter. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, he actually did it." Eleanor shot a poisonous look at the crowd. "This does not exempt you from community standards," she hissed. "Which ones?" I asked. "The ones you can enforce, or the ones you wish you could enforce?" Her nostrils flared. I swear I saw smoke. Right on cue, an engine revved loudly down the street. Ray's truck. He pulled up to the curb like he was arriving at a red carpet event, hopped out, and called brightly, "Hey, cuz, you leave my car out again? What if it gets lonely?" Eleanor's head snapped toward him. "Your car?" she repeated. Ray beamed. "Yep. Bought it for $1. Best deal of my life." Her face contorted into something between a grimace and a full-body stroke. "That price is absurd." Ray shrugged. "Absurd deals happen between family." You wouldn't believe what he made me pay for his old blender. I choked on my coffee. Ray clapped me on the back. Anyway, I'm here to take my car for a spin. He jingled the keys. Eleanor looked like she was going to faint. He got in, started the engine, waved goodbye, and drove off with a cheerful honk that echoed like a victory trumpet through the neighborhood. I turned back to Eleanor. Any other questions? She said nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just stared at me with an expression of such profound betrayal that you'd think I'd personally toppled her entire regime. Finally, she spoke. "This," she said low, trembling with indignation, "is not over." I smiled. I didn't think it was. She spun on her heel and stormed off, muttering something under her breath that I'm fairly sure wasn't neighborly. The neighbors scattered like witnesses fleeing a crime scene. One of them gave me a salute. I stood there, letting the quiet return, feeling something I hadn't felt since this whole thing began. Victory. Real, genuine, perfectly legal victory. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this latest twist hadn't just defeated her. No, it had infuriated her, which meant she was cooking up something drastic, and I couldn't wait to see what it was. There are moments in life when you know, absolutely know, that someone is plotting something catastrophic. A shift in the air, a strange quiet, a sense that the universe is taking a deep breath before throwing a punch. That was the feeling I had the day after Ray's triumphant drive-off. Eleanor Blackstone had vanished. Not literally. She hadn't moved away. She hadn't spontaneously evaporated in a puff of beige fabric. But for 3 full days, she did not. Patrol the street, leave HOA notes on doors, appear with her clipboard like an omen of doom, harass anyone about mulch color, mailbox height, lawn length, or inappropriate garden gnomes. It was unsettling, like the eye of a hurricane. Too calm, too quiet. Everyone felt it. "Where is she?" Mrs. Alvarez whispered to me during her evening walk with Pebbles. "She's planning something," I said. Pebbles wheezed in agreement. By the 3rd day, even the treasurer, the timid glasses-wearing man from the board, knocked on my door looking pale. "If she's quiet," he said, "that's usually when she's working on a project." A project. Fantastic. On Thursday, an email hit every inbox in the neighborhood. Emergency HO gathering. Attendance required topic, community safety and order enforcement initiatives. Oh, she wasn't even pretending anymore. She was calling the whole neighborhood together for a show of force. And I knew, without question, that I was the target. Neighbors gathered outside the community center before the meeting like spectators entering a wrestling match. There were whispers, nervous laughter, and even a few bets being placed, mostly about who would yell first. Inside, the chairs were arranged in rows facing a small raised platform, something that had not been there at previous meetings. And standing atop that platform, wearing her most authoritarian beige ensemble, was Eleanor Blackstone. She tapped the microphone. Testing. It screeched like a tortured spirit, a fitting sound. "Thank you all for coming," she announced in a tone that implied she'd personally summoned us with divine authority. The room went silent. "We have," she continued, "a growing crisis in Ash Grove Meadows." A crisis? Really? Had a sinkhole opened? Had a meteor landed? Had someone planted a non-HOA-approved shrub? No, of course not. "Certain residents," she emphasized, eyes drilling into me, "have been exploiting ambiguities in the CC&Rs, undermining community standards." Someone coughed "Mark" into their sleeve. I lifted a hand in acknowledgement. Eleanor pressed on. "To address this, I am proposing a new enforcement unit." My eyebrows shot up. Oh no, oh no, no, no. She picked up a stack of papers. "Introducing the Ash Grove Compliance Task Force." The room erupted. Laughs, groans, gasps, one single horrified, "What?" From the back. I blinked. A task force? What did she think this was? A covert, military operation. Several neighbors exchanged wide-eyed looks. One whispered, "Is she forming a militia?" She continued, "This task force will patrol daily to ensure adherence to all community guidelines." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "Who volunteers for this task force?" Eleanor smiled. "Volunteers are welcome, but not required." The room fell dead silent. Not required. She was drafting citizens into her suburban army. Holy hell. I stood up. "Eleanor, with all due respect, this is ridiculous." She folded her hands behind her back. "Ridiculous or necessary?" "Ridiculous," I repeated. "We do not need neighborhood foot soldiers policing street parking and mailbox paint." Her smile didn't falter. "The task force will ensure compliance in all areas." I stepped forward. "Compliance with enforceable rules, yes, but you cannot enforce anything involving public streets. We've already been through this." Her eyes glimmered with something dark. "Perhaps. But the CCNRs allow for community behavioral monitoring." I barked out a laugh. "Behavioral monitoring? What is this, North Korea HOA edition?" Gasps. One clap. A few suppressed snickers. Her face reddened. "Mr. Bennett, your attitude continues to prove why stricter measures are necessary. I'm parking a car legally. You're escalating like I'm committing tax fraud." She stepped down from the platform, heels clicking like gunfire. "You have deliberately circumvented community expectations," she said. "I followed the law," I shot back. "You exploited a loophole," she hissed. "You wrote the loophole." She froze. For a moment, just a moment, she looked shaken. Then something hardened in her expression. A new resolve, a terrifying one. "Fine," she said softly. "If you insist on technicalities, we will meet you with technicalities." I frowned. "Meaning," she raised her chin, "I am proposing an amendment to the CCNRs." The room erupted again. "Oh, come on, Eleanor. You can't be serious. This is insane." She talked over them. "The amendment will require all residents to utilize their garage for the primary purpose of vehicle storage, regardless of ownership. Any routinely parked vehicle must be stored within the homeowner's garage when not in immediate use." A few neighbors whispered urgently. I did the math instantly. Regardless of ownership, meaning even if the car belonged to Ray, if I parked it here, she could try to regulate it. She had found her nuclear option, the final escalation. A rule rewrite targeted directly at me. People argued, shouted, protested. The treasurer tried to speak, then gave up and sank into his chair. Eleanor raised her gavel and banged it so hard that it cracked. "The amendment vote," she said triumphantly, "will take place in 2 weeks." 2 weeks. That was all the time I had. 2 weeks before Eleanor rewrote the very fabric of our neighborhood's reality just to crush me under her bureaucratic heel. 2 weeks before she erased the very loophole I'd exploited. 2 weeks before this Cold War turned into a decisive battle. I walked home that night under the streetlight glow, passing the familiar curb where Ray's car sat peacefully. And for the first time, I felt something new. Not victory, not satisfaction, but determination. Eleanor was pulling out her biggest weapon, which meant it was my turn to plan my next move, my smartest move, my most deviously legal move yet. And trust me, I had one forming. 2 weeks. That's how long I had before Eleanor Blackstone attempted to rewrite our community's laws like some suburban despot drafting a new constitution. 2 weeks until her precious CCNR amendment went up for a neighborhood vote. An amendment designed exclusively, vindictively, beautifully to destroy my parking loophole. I spent those 2 weeks planning, not scheming. Planning. Because Eleanor might rely on intimidation, theatrics, and the inexhaustible power of her clipboard, but I had something far more potent on my side. The entire neighborhood's collective exhaustion. For years, maybe decades, Eleanor had micromanaged every bush, bin, and brick in Ash Grove Meadows. People tolerated her for the same reason you tolerate cold weather. It's inconvenient, but survivable. But now she'd crossed a line, and everyone knew it. I didn't need to knock on doors or hand out flyers. I simply existed. As I walked the neighborhood, people stopped me to vent. Did you hear she told the Petersons their wreath wasn't seasonally appropriate? She made my son move his skateboard inside the garage during lunch. She tried to cite me for having too many garden flags. They were all patriotic. It wasn't a campaign. It was a confessional booth. And Eleanor had sinned against everybody. The best part? I didn't recruit a single person. The neighborhood recruited itself. By the day of the vote, the brewing frustration had turned into a quiet, simmering unity. The community center had never been so full. People who'd never attended an HOA meeting in their lives showed up, folding chairs clattering and murmurs filling the air. Ray arrived with popcorn. He said it was for dramatic effect. Eleanor stood at the front wearing a blazer instead of her usual cardigan, her war suit. "Thank you all for attending this important gathering," she announced. "Tonight, we vote on an amendment vital to the order and integrity of Ash Grove Meadows." There was a low rumble of discontent. She continued. "The new clause will require all residents to utilize their garages for vehicle storage regardless of vehicle ownership." Then she turned to look at me, the stare of a woman who had bet everything on this moment. "Any comments before we proceed?" she said. I stood. "Just one," I said. "This amendment doesn't serve the community. It serves a grudge." The room erupted in applause. Eleanor banged her gavel like she was trying to summon a demon. "This is not a debate session." But the crowd wasn't listening to her anymore. Mr. Rodriguez stood. "Why should we change the rules because you lost an argument?" Mrs. Alvarez raised her hand. "You don't even let pebbles walk on your grass, and now you want to tell everyone how to use their garages?" Pebbles punctuated her remark with a heroic snort. Even the timid treasurer spoke up. "This amendment is, well, it's bad." Eleanor's face turned the color of sunburnt sand. This is highly irregular. This meeting is out of order." But the tide had turned. The board chair, usually silent, finally stepped forward. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "we appreciate your service, truly, but this goes too far." Gasps, a few thank gods, one amen. The board huddled for a brief minute. Then the chair turned around. We moved to vote. Ballots were passed out. Neighbors scribbled. Some glared at Eleanor while doing so. Ray pretended he was marking a bingo card. The ballots were collected, counted, double counted. Finally, the chair stood again. "The amendment fails," he announced. 87-3. The room exploded. Cheers, claps, laughter. Someone started a slow clap that turned into a fast clap that turned into a chant of, "Let him park! Let him park!" I looked at Eleanor. She stood motionless, arms stiff at her sides, expression blank in the way only a person experiencing existential crisis can achieve. And then, without a word, she turned, gathered her things, and walked out of the room. Not stormed, not stomped, walked, defeated, utterly and completely. Life didn't magically become perfect after that, but it became peaceful. Eleanor stepped down from the HOA board for personal reasons. Translation: she'd rather ingest gravel than face another meeting full of people who'd discovered the power of saying no. The new board members were relaxed, reasonable, and shockingly human. They even created a community appreciation day where people brought potluck dishes instead of passive-aggressive complaints. As for me, every morning I park Ray's car, yes, still legally his, on the same stretch of curb. Every evening, I open the garage and admire the polished brilliance of my Jaguar E-Type. No fines, no notes, no hearings, no task force of suburban foot soldiers. And every now and then, when I sip my coffee on the porch, I imagine Eleanor somewhere far away, still insisting that her binder should have won. But it didn't. Common sense did. Neighborliness did. And maybe, just maybe, a ridiculous amount of petty determination did too. Ray eventually sold the daily driver back to me. For $2. Inflation, he said. And that's my story. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate you giving the video a like and the channel a subscribe. And if you want more HOA stories like this, drop a comment below and let me know what kind of stories you'd like to hear. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll hopefully catch you next time.